All right, so we're talking about how these waters possibly receded and how the earth took care of it. So the question was asked, which has more surface area, a tennis ball or a golf ball? The reason I say a golf ball is the way you calculate surface area. So this is me enlarging a golf ball. See those little divots in the golf ball? When you measure surface area, you don't measure like this. You measure like this. And you're doing that all over this golf. Now, so y'all can understand now how a golf ball has more surface area. So one way the earth could have taken care of this water is, we're going to find out later, is that it probably, if you have flat land, then you start getting these mountains and valleys. So that creates more surface area to hold the water. So that's how the earth possibly retained some of this excess water fluid that was on the earth. So the geography and topography would have definitely changed from this. At the end of 150 days, the water had gone down.
How about water going down back into the earth?
So a lot of it would have. So it would have, just like today when we get rains, we don't have valleys and mountains form, but the water does get soaked back. How much of it? You've got, prior to this, all this water that surrounded the earth, that's the water I worry about. Where did it go? Because the waters from the deep could have been compensated for. Well, definitely the climate, we're going to talk about that. The climate definitely changes dramatically.
It doesn't have to be a reasonable explanation, it's a miracle.
I know, I'm just giving you a reason why sun draws water, but it still has to stay in our atmosphere. It's not going in outer space. So it has to go somewhere. So the waters continue to recede into the 10th month. So the water is going in there now. But let's go to verse 6. After 40 days, Noah opened a window he had made in the ark and sent out a raven, and it kept flying back and forth until the water had dried up from the earth. So after 40, so if we're adding days up, we got close to 190 days before he sends out this raven. And it says it kept flying back and forth until the water had dried up from the earth. So what happened to the raven? One of the arguments you're going to find, and I have an argument against it, is that the ravens were scavengers. And there would have been a lot of dead, but what's the argument against that? As far as we know, animals were not eating meat. Everything was vegetarian at this point. So that argument for the raven, unless we're missing something, ravens would not have had anything to eat. Ravens are bigger than doves, which we're going to find out, so they could have flown out farther looking for land. Do you think Mount Ararat is the highest mountain on earth? No. It is, the mountains of Ararat, the highest peak of one of the mountains is about 12,000 feet above sea level right now, as of today. There's other mountains higher than that. It could have been that this raven found somewhere that was out from under the water. It could have been that this raven just flew to the point where it flew so far out it couldn't make it back and it died. We don't know. But the assumption that it lived off the carry-on that was floating, that doesn't work out by God's commands of everything being a vegetarian at this point. It also would make sense why he chose a dove next, because he would have fought through some of these things. We're going to find out in a minute what the dove finds. We don't know. But you would have thought it would come back if it was smart. Not all animals are smart. You've seen animals that get out in the middle of the water and can't make it back and they drown. So some animals don't do what they're supposed to do. Then it says in verse 8, then he sent out a dove to see if the water had receded from the surface of the ground. We don't know how long he waited here. We assume it was 7 days, as he waits 7 days between all these other birds that he sends out. But he sends this dove out, and the dove could find nowhere to perch. Well, the dove is not going to fly out as far. It's got smaller wingspan. It can't cover as much ground. It probably just went out of just a certain amount of area and said, I got to come back. And so it's not going to land on the water. So the dove could find nowhere to perch because there was water over all the surface of the earth. So it returned to Noah in the ark. So it did come back. He reached out his hand and took the dove and brought it back to himself in the ark. He waited 7 more days, here's a week, and again sent out the dove from the ark. When the dove returned to him in the evening, there in its beak was a freshly plucked olive leaf. Then Noah knew that the water had receded from the earth. Well, where did this olive leaf come from? I guess it's the leaves if they hung onto the tree. If the water is coming up slowly, you're not necessarily going to be tearing leaves off the trees, and they can float with leaves if they're healthy and attached. And then when the water recedes, there'd still be leaves. I would think, but this is almost a year. So probably this could have been one of those miraculous things. If you notice though, it says an olive leaf. It doesn't say an olive branch. What's the old saying about when you're trying to make peace with somebody? I extend an olive branch. That's different than what this is, though. Isn't it? Get it from this, but a dove ain't carrying a whole branch. A dove ain't big enough to carry an olive branch. It carried an olive leaf, and it was plucked. But so we got this olive leaf rather than a branch, and he comes back, and all this does is tell Noah what? That there's some land, especially one that tree could survive. So he does 7 days and sends the dove out again. But this time it did not return to him. So what does he do? He more out, because he needs a dove that brought back a leaf. There's land. He sends out a dove and it don't come back. So he assumes that he's out there somewhere. But he doesn't do anything else still, other than we see on verse 15, by 13. First day of the first month of Noah's 601st year, the water up from the earth. Noah then removed the covering from the ark and saw the surface of the ground was dry. By the 27th day of the second month, the earth was completely dry. So how long did he wait after that first day of the first month and then the 27th day of the second month? So he waits, almost 2 months. If you do the math here, he's there on the ark almost a complete year, okay? A few questions. How did they have enough water on that ark? We talked about the food. How did they keep enough fresh water on that ark for a year? Even humans probably, I think for a year, I think for part of that, they were probably in a state of decreased metabolism, whatever it was, whether it was they were alive, they were awake, it was a decreased metabolism, or they were sleeping through most of this. You know, today you need a gallon of water per person per day. I think that's the right planning thing. And you got 8 people, 8 gallons of water for 365 days, comes out to what? Roughly 25,000 gallons of water. Just to think about, and then you got the food and you got the animals. There was something for this year, I think there was something miraculous going on that even humans did not need all this sustenance. Like they were put into like some kind of hibernation of some sort as well. Vitamin D supplements, so that was in there. It says 2 of every animal and a vitamin D for every day. Well, you know, you've got 9 billion people plus all the animals. The water probably would not have been very clean. I don't know. So yeah. Anyway, these are things to think about. The reason I bring it up is you're going to have other people ask you this. And it's not because I'm trying to be fanatical about seeking out mysteries. But guess what? If somebody's trying to prove you the Bible's not real, they will be fanatical about seeking out mysteries. There are 400 different flood accounts from cultures, and they use different names. They all have subtle differences about how many were on the ark, how it happened, I think there's 400. I think this came from the Tower of Babel. I think this story was passed down orally, and then you change the language, and then when they spread out, they carry it with them. But little things like they play the game Mailbox, how things get changed. That's the only way I can account for 400 different flood accounts. Okay, even the Mayans flood account. How would the Mayans get a flood account when they're on a completely different continent? Of all 400 of them, use the name Noah, other than this one. This would be the Hebrew, right? It's the Hebrew account of the flood. But that they're going to point out to you, well, how can this be true when there's every has only on the flood? It's like I talked about earlier. Is that the Grand Canyon could have been formed by the change of the topography to provide a surface area for these things. I don't have all the answers, but I think the earth was dramatically changed. If you got that much water falling on any kind of land, I mean, you can't get 2 or 3 days here without having gullies and ditches formed in your yard. Now, if you've had deluge that covers the earth for 40 days, you're going to have some dramatic. You know what? Even the Sphinx there's on the Sphinx in Egypt, where a flood of some sort came through. So we don't know if it was this flood or if it was another flood. But if you look at all these different, some of these structures, a lot of them show signs of the continent separate later.
Back to chapter 7, verse 11, it says all of the springs of the deep also. So a lot of the land adjustment, like Dale was asking, that could happen
Just with that.
during this flood.
Yeah. I mean, the earth changed. As far as question, the reason I don't think it completely was, there probably was some separation, but we're going to have a direct correlation moving coming up when we talk about some genealogy here. Where'd we to? So they've been on a calendar year. Verse 15, then God said to Noah, come out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons and their wives. Bring out every living creature that is with you, the birds, the animals, and all the creatures that move along the ground, so that they can multiply on the earth and be fruitful and increase in number on it. So Noah came out together with his sons and his wife and his sons' wives, all the animals and all the creatures that move along the ground and all the birds. Everything that moves on land came out of the ark, one kind after another. That's funny. Don't you think, how would you normally picture it if you just open up the door and let all the animals out? Yeah, you got them trampled. These things came out in an orderly fashion. You know, this is playing on this. So it makes you talk about how Eve spoke to a serpent. It makes you wonder if these animals, you always wonder if could you still be talking to the animals at this point? Because you're going to have a commandment here in a minute that kind of changes the relationship with man and animals as well. So they came one kind after another. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and taking some of all the clean animals and clean birds, he sacrificed burnt offerings on it. The Lord smelled the pleasing aroma and said in his heart, never again will I curse the ground because of humans, even though every inclination of the human heart is evil from childhood. And never again will I destroy all living creatures as I have done. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease. All right, a couple questions here. What's the first thing Noah did when he came out of the ark? He built an altar, yeah. And what do? Sacrifice what? How do you know what was unclean? We have in Leviticus what defined a clean and unclean animal. What typically defined the unclean animal? Well, that would be a clean animal, right? Most of the unclean animals were like stuff that just whatever, you know, usually dead stuff. All I can say is one of two things happened. God told him what was clean and unclean, or this is the influence of Moses writing, because he would have known what was clean and unclean. He would have known. And God would have just filled the ark with 7 clean animals or 7 pairs, 1 pair of unclean, because he knew it was important for man. But at this point, until Levitical law, we don't know what is clean and unclean. But also think about this. Why would he sacrifice when you just came off and now you've only got 7 pairs of surviving animals and you decide to kill one of them? That's a call. Sacrifice something that hurts. It also shows you're what? Shows you're going to provide it. Because just like Abraham would have given up Isaac, Noah's given up something that's important, showing faith that knows that God knows better, and he's going to. Because we don't have anything saying that God commanded this. Noah took this upon himself to do it. It says, the Lord, the pleasing aroma, and said in his heart, never again will I curse the ground because of humans. What do you think about this? Even though every inclination of the human heart is evil from childhood. Look at verse 21. Never again will I curse the ground because of humans, even though every inclination of the human heart is evil from childhood. This almost reads like you assume they're evil. We don't think babies are not evil, right? Bent towards evil. No, Jesus said, bring the children to me, unless you become like these little children, you'll never enter the kingdom. So, children, until they're taught, they don't know. That's a right answer. But I don't know could they be inclined, if you left a child out in the wild to be raised, would they be inclined to evil?
Selfishness. Yeah.
They're going to survive. They can survive. All right, so when man influenced by outside sources, when they are away from God, they essentially turn to evil. So that's almost like leaving a child in the wilderness. From his youth, okay, that's probably more. It didn't say the day they were born anyway. Then look at verse 22. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease. Had you ever thought about at this point that till this time they had never had seasons? Because the water surrounding the earth would have kept it essentially a moderate summer all year round. And we talked about last week, when this happened, you almost have flash freezes. The climate would have changed dramatically. This would be your ice age that you see in history. People are going to now learn how to live through the different seasons. And he's saying now from now on, as long as the earth is around, there's going to be seasons. There's going to be cold and hot. There's going to be seed time. There's going to be harvest time. You know, before it was growing, you harvest it. It was a continuous thing. You didn't have to say, well, this month is when we harvest this, because it was growing year round. But now, separation of seasons, a separation of temperatures and climate. So this was climate change, rather than us cars and burning fuel causing climate change. Look at let's go to chapter 9. Any questions on chapter 8 to this point?
I wanted to reiterate verse 19. This is a New Revised Standard Version. It says, and every animal, every creeping thing, and every bird, everything that moves on the earth went out of the ark by families.
Yours says families?
Yeah, I thought that was unusual.
That's different, isn't it? Because a family, you'd have the family of cats, family of canines, you'd have a family of equine. So that's even different.
That's what New King James, it says according to their families.
So this NIV, of course, what does it say? One kind after another. So
verse 1.
yeah.
But God remembered the wild animals and all the
Livestock.
domestic animals that were with him in the ark.
Yeah.
And that way.
As far as we know, they still were not predators.
We know years in what happened.
Mm-hmm.
It was easily telling Noah that I'm going back to the seasons that you've always known. During this flood time, he took away all that, and now he's saying, I'm putting all this back in place and it will never change.
It could be. All I push back on is because the climate would have been so much different with around it. Because we to this vapor shield, even the lifespan and illnesses and stuff like that. But you could be right. I don't answer. They had to work the ground. The ground definitely was not as Look at chapter 9. Then God blessed Noah and his sons, saying to them, be fruitful and increase in number and fill the earth. So who did he tell that to? What was that? Noah and his sons. So he just told Noah to have more kids, didn't he? He's 600, he's got another 300 years to live, I think. So, but we don't have those children listed because it says that Shem, Ham, and Japheth essentially populates the earth. All that is because they were Noah may not have had more children, but this verse says God told him to. But let's assume he did have more children. All that means is that those children probably interspersed with their older brothers and aunts or whatever, and just kind of interspersed with their tribes. But the main what we have the earth in here. Now look at verse 2. In dread of you will fall on all the beasts of the earth, and on all the birds in the sky, on every creature that moves along the ground, and all the fish of the sea. They are given into your hands. Everything that lives and moves about will be food for you. Just as I gave you the green plants, I now give you everything. All right? I'm not even going to say anything. What thoughts do y'all have about those verses? I don't want to lead you on to something. But if y'all were teaching this class, what would you point out from those verses?
Seems to be opening up that you can eat meat.
That you can eat meat. What else? What's the relationship now between animals? They're scared. They're going to be scared. They're going to run because they know rather than now possibly even talking to you, they're going to be running from you. What else? This will be my question maybe, but y'all know my mind now, or do you? Did any of them what they could eat? So once again, we have a kind of a conundrum about clean and unclean, don't we? Because he didn't say you can't eat a catfish. Not yet. No, it is missing out when they said you can't eat catfish, did he? Eat the small animals that scurry the ground.
Yeah, but it doesn't.
I don't know where they got that translation though, to be honest. The small scurrying animals. You can have squirrels and rabbits. Verse 2, every creature that on the ground. So
That's the only one that's two.
what version are you reading? The easy to read version?
Yes.
So
I went all.
yeah, that was pretty limiting. But let's just take it. Let's just run with it. Okay? Noah lived on squirrel. Yeah, everything. So, yeah, my version, I don't have this video. Yeah, what is verse?
For me?
Yeah. I don't think that's odd too, to be honest. But maybe because it'd be easier. At that time, for 8 people, you don't need to slaughter a cow. You could, a lot of waste, unless you knew preservation. As long as you're saying they could eat all the vegetation, yeah. point that they use clean and unclean in some of the distinctions, but then they don't make a distinction here. Verse 4 is just talking about how you eat it. Look at verse 4. But you must meat that has its lifeblood still in it. So everything that moves has blood in it. Essentially what he's saying is you should, first of all, the animal should be dead. You know why he stressed this? There were animals, because there are even cultures today that do this. They will eat on an animal before it's dead. Okay? So he's saying bust must be dead, and it must be bled out. There must not be blood in it. Okay?